Hi, I'm Pam, and I'm here to talk about video games. So today I'm continuing on my look back of years gone by and my most anticipated games and whatever happened to them. My first video looked back at 2018, and all of the anticipated games there did actually come out, although I think I didn't play one of them. However, this year, which is looking back at my 2020 most anticipated games, is a bit of a different story. It seems like 2020 is going to be another good year for games. There are a lot of huge releases planned to release in 2020, as well as some smaller ones that I'm really looking forward to, so I just wanted to go over what I am most anticipating. The first game shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who follows me, but it's Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Bloodlines 2, where to begin? There has been a lot of drama and delay around this game. I was so excited when it was first announced. Bloodlines 1 is one of my favorite games of all time, just the ideal, impeccable role-playing game, and I was really excited when a sequel was announced. At the time, I was even making videos, giving updates on what the developers were saying, and looking at the clans and features that had been announced for the game. This was initially announced to be coming out in Q1 of 2020, and then it got just a nebulous delay, and it is still not out. Back in the summer of 2020, Brian Mitsoda, who was the writer on the first Bloodlines, got terminated as the game's narrative lead, which wasn't a very good sign. Also, in 2021, the developers, Hardsuit Labs, were let go and replaced by the Chinese Room. The Chinese Room is a studio most known for honestly kind of boring walking simulators like Dear Esther and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, but that doesn't mean that they can't make an RPG just because they've never made one before. The game is now set to release in the first half of 2025, meaning sometime in the next few months. I'm still not entirely sure that that will actually happen. I've sort of lost interest in the project. Honestly, it's a game that when it comes out, if it comes out, I will pick it up, I will play it because I love Bloodlines 1 so much, but I don't particularly have any high hopes or expectations. I really haven't been following any of the new development that's been happening much. I'm sort of just taking a wait and see approach for it. The next one was actually supposed to be a 2019 release, but it did get pushed back, and it is Doom Eternal. So Doom Eternal, when it was originally announced, it was planned to come out in 2019, and at the point I made this video, it had a date of March 20th, 2020, and it did release at that time. I loved Doom 2016 so much, I made a glowing review of it. If you haven't watched that, you should go check that out. So I was very excited for a follow-up, and I did end up buying Doom Eternal on day one. Now, sadly, Doom Eternal ended up making an appearance on my most disappointing games of 2020 video at the end of the year. It's not that it's a bad game, it definitely still has its good points, the gunplay still feels good, but they made a lot of changes and added a lot of features that I really wasn't enjoying. The start of the game got things off on a bad foot for me. The pacing was weird. They were constantly giving you tutorial pop-ups every time you were introduced to one of the many demons or guns or abilities that you had, and I thought were introduced way too quickly. Plus, there were just too many cutscenes, and the first few levels had some particularly egregious first-person platforming sections that really just weren't any fun at all. Yeah, Doom Eternal really just felt like a step down from Doom 2016, although it had its good points, like the environments and the levels were actually much more interesting looking than the first game, but I found that the beginning and end especially really dragged, and Doom is a game where I want things to be pushing forward with non-stop momentum. And of course, there is another Doom set to come out in May of this year. Okay, so I've already lied. This next one is supposed to come out March 11th, putting it before Doom Eternal, but it is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So Ori and the Will of the Wisps was set to come out on March 11th, 2020, and it did, in fact, come out on that day. I loved the first Ori and the Blind Forest, and I wanted this to be just bigger and better, and overall, it was. Ori and the Will of the Wisps ended up taking the number 2 spot on my Best Games of 2020 video, so it is one that definitely met my expectations and I ended up really loving. I had a few minor complaints about Blind Forest, one of being the weird manual save system, and that was done away with in Will of the Wisps. It also had the same amazingly fluid traversal and movement systems that the first game had. It also put much more of an emphasis on boss fights and gave you a lot of different weapons to use and play with in order to succeed at those boss fights. Combat overall was more important than the first game, although I would still say that the movement and platforming was where the game really shone, and it continued to do so with some exceptionally good chase sequence, especially in the sequel. I also really liked that they added a hub world that sort of evolved over time, and it sort of marked the passage of time and your progress in the world, and overall, it just ended up being a fantastic game. Next is Hades by Supergiant Games, and technically this game has already been playable for quite a while. It's in early access, or whatever the equivalent of that is on the Epic Store, but I don't play games on early access. I like to wait until they're finished before I start digging into them. So when I made this video, Hades had actually been out in early access since 2018, but I don't like to play early access games. It ended up releasing for real in September of 2020. Supergiant is just such a great developer. They always have an amazing aesthetic. They look and sound great. I love the music and all the voice acting in their games. And I really respected and appreciated that they changed up genres with every single game. So Hades ended up being a game that's pretty much universally loved, and it's definitely Supergiant's most successful game to date, so successful that they are even making a sequel, which should be coming out later this year. Hades ended up taking the number 5 spot on my Best Games of 2020 video, and I did sink a lot of hours into it. I think it's gorgeous. I love the art and the characters. The voice acting, as always, is great. The music, as always, is great. I liked the inclusion of Greek gods and different deities, and I really liked the story and how it revealed itself slowly over time between runs. The combat is fast and fun. There are lots of different weapons. Well, not lots, but a handful of different weapons that you can master and different boons that you can put together to build your character. My only problem is that I really wish it wasn't a roguelike. As good as the whole game is, I just don't like doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I really loved the side stories and wish to bring them all to their conclusion, but it's just too much running over those same 4 dungeons in the same order over and over again. Still, I got a lot of enjoyment out of Hades, and Hades 2 is in early access now, supposed to be coming out sometime later this year. Although, to be honest, the first Hades was too much Hades already, so I'm not sure if I'm going to play the next one. A really easy way to get me interested in a game is to say it has XCOM-like combat, and Empire of Sin is a game that should be coming out in Q2 of 2020 by Romero Games. Empire of Sin is one I really haven't thought of much lately or heard many other people talk about. It was supposed to come out in Q2 of 2020. It ended up being delayed and it released in December of 2020. This is a strategy game where you play a mob boss in Prohibition-era Chicago. You have to manage your people, your businesses, your rivals, and all of your illegal activities. The game sold itself on having XCOM-like combat combined with some role-playing where you develop your character and make strategic decisions, so it clearly was a game that was up my alley. Unfortunately, I ended up being quite disappointed with this game. It didn't feel particularly finished, and it was quite buggy. The combat was alright, but it was on the simple side, and it did get tedious fighting the same kind of enemies in the same environments over and over again. And whereas the combat was simple, the sort of grand strategy aspect was much more complex, and I felt that they introduced new mechanics way too quickly for me to pick up on them. There definitely needed to be a better onboarding process in order to teach the player how to play. There were some really cool moments, like when you sit down with the leaders of rival gangs in order to negotiate, but most of the game, you just ended up in menus looking at interfaces and watching numbers go up and down. Empire of Sin tries to do a lot of things, but it doesn't do any of them particularly well, so I ended up giving up on this one a few hours in. So this next one I just found out about recently, and I'm not even sure how I found out about it, but it's called Yes, Your Grace, and it is a kingdom management simulation. It is developed by Brave at Night. Yes, Your Grace is a role-playing strategy game and kingdom management game. It was set to come out in early 2020, and it did in fact come out in March of 2020. This game has absolutely gorgeous pixel art, and it's all about managing your kingdom, your subjects, and your family. Resource management and decision-making is really my jam, so I'm always attracted to any game in this kind of genre. So in this, you are playing basically a kingdom sim, but also a dad sim, because a lot of the decisions that you're making have to do with your family, your wife, your daughters, marrying them off, dealing with all of their issues, all the while trying to run a kingdom and prepare it for a possible incoming attack from a neighboring country. Overall, I did enjoy this game, though it was a little bit different than what I was expecting. I felt like it was quite linear. I sort of expected my decisions to be able to send me down different paths, but as I played it over for a second time, I was finding that the same events were happening from playthrough to playthrough. Overall, I still did enjoy it though, and it was challenging to balance, your supplies, your gold, and your desire to help everyone, even though that's not always possible. There is a sequel to this that's been announced. It's called Yes, Your Grace Snowfall, although there is not a release date yet. So I've been playing a lot of Hollow Knight recently. I just finished it, but I keep going back to it to sort of pick away at it to try to get a higher completion and get better endings. And though I had a rough start with the game, I have really come to love it. So I was very excited to find out that there's a sequel coming out called Hollow Knight Silksong. Hollow Knight Silksong was first announced in February of 2019. I'm not sure if they gave a 2020 release date, but the funny thing about this 2020 anticipated video is that I wasn't that excited about it because it was announced to be coming out on Switch and PC, and I really wanted it for Xbox. However, my love for Hollow Knight has only grown over the years. With every subsequent playthrough, I just find myself loving it more and more, so my excitement levels are very strange for this one. I would love to have more Hollow Knight, but at the same time, at this point, I'm not overly impatient for it, and it'll happen when it happens. Over the last 5 years, there have been times when I've gotten more excited, like when it was included in an Xbox event in June of 2022 that purported to only be showing games coming out in the next year and coming out for Xbox Game Pass, but whatever happened to that, I don't know. I will absolutely be buying and playing Silksong if and when it does come out, but really, as of now, I'm kind of ignoring all the noise and all the clickbait videos about where Silksong is. It'll come out when it comes out, or never, whatever. So the last 3 games that I talked about in this video weren't actually my personal most anticipated games. They were the most anticipated games of everyone else that I just thought I'd talk about. A few special mentions, partially to prevent 100 "what about this game" comments. Final Fantasy VII. I was so excited when Final Fantasy VII Remaster was announced. I actually cried during the announcement. I thought it looked beautiful. It's a game that really meant a lot to me when I played it back in the beginning of high school, but it just, I don't know, watching some of the trailers, it doesn't look or sound that good. So when Final Fantasy VII Remake was first announced in 2015, I was very excited. However, 5 years later, when I made this video, it was supposed to be coming out that year in 2020, and it did in fact come out in April of 2020. And honestly, I wasn't that excited about it at this point, 5 years past that original announcement. My expectations were actually quite low already. I seem to have a real problem with the voice acting, which I don't remember having a problem with when I actually played it, but the previews, apparently I didn't like how they acted. I also, and still, don't like the fact that it is episodic, so I was more wary than excited for the game at this point. I did end up playing some of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and honestly, I didn't care for it. I thought they put a lot of extra junk content in it in order to stuff it as full as possible. I mean, in the original, you're in Midgar for what, like less than 4 hours before you leave? And how they managed to make that into an entire, like, 30-hour RPG is just beyond me. I just felt like they added so much nonsense that wasn't really fun. I didn't particularly care for any of the combat. In fact, the only combat sections I really liked were a couple more of like one-on-one duels that ended up being a little fun, both from a story and a mechanics perspective. The characters are all super hot, but the game just wasn't very fun. I ended up quitting this right after the wall market section of the game because I felt like I had seen the best of what it had to offer and didn't need to play anymore. So the next big one is, of course, The Last of Us 2, which I think is set to come out in May. The Last of Us 2 was set to come out in May, and it actually came out in June of 2020. And I said I'd play it, but I never ended up playing it. I thought the first game was alright. Good story, good voice acting and mocap, pretty mediocre gameplay. I said that I would play this because I didn't want to miss the cultural zeitgeist, but honestly the conversation and the dialogue around this game ended up being unavoidable and also pretty annoying. Honestly, the real reason I never ended up playing The Last of Us 2 is because I lost the PS4 in a breakup, and this game wasn't enough to make me buy another one. And I think rivaling or maybe even edging out The Last of Us 2 for the biggest release of the year, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 had all kinds of release date issues and just release issues in general. It was supposed to be coming out in April of 2020 and had just recently, as of that video, been delayed to September. It ended up coming out on December 10th, 2020. I really wasn't excited for this game at all. When it was first announced, that teaser trailer way back in 2012, I was excited, but after so many years, 8 years, and just being inundated with news items about Cyberpunk, my hype for it had really bottomed out. Of course, when it did come out, there were tons of issues. People complained about performance a lot. It even had to be taken off the PlayStation Store because the performance was so bad for people. There were class action lawsuits. That's how bad the issues were. So after all of the poor reviews and technical issues, I really had no desire to play Cyberpunk at all. However, with the latest expansion, which is called the Phantom Liberty, I have heard that the game is actually pretty good now. And one day, when I have an excess amount of time, I would like to try it. Just hasn't happened yet. So when looking back at the most anticipated games in 2020, we still have 2 that have yet to be released: Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 and Silksong. Which do you think will come out first? If you want to see more, check out my Best Games of 2020 video and see the great games that actually did release. I have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.